Channing Tatum returns to the stage alongside newcomer Salma Hayek in Magic Mike's Last Dance. A young woman travels to a Catholic convent to investigate her brother's mysterious death in Consecration. And Reese Witherspoon and Ashton Kutcher swap homes for a week in Your Place or Mine. All this and more is being released this weekend. Hello guys, I am the Hick Critic here bringing you my opinions of the films that were just released. As always, keep in mind these are my own personal opinions. Feel free to check out any of the films that seem interesting to you. If you do decide to see any of the films reviewed today, make sure to comment below what you thought about it to possibly have it featured in an upcoming episode. Also, before anyone says anything, yes, I am aware that Titanic has been re-released. Again, in theaters this weekend. I'm not really that interested in reviewing films that have already been out for such a long time, especially ones that have been talked about and discussed as much as this one has, since this show is more about reviewing the movies that were just released. But in case you're wondering, yes, I do really like Titanic, so if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it on the big screen, I'd say check it out if you're curious. Alright, let's dive right in. No pun intended. Our first film tonight is Magic Mike's Last Dance, which is the third film in the seemingly dormant franchise, with the director of the original film, Steven Soderbergh, returning to the director's chair. And spoiler alert, this is not very good, both as a film in general, and even as a Magic Mike sequel. Mike, played by Channing Tatum, hasn't danced or stripped in 8 years. After his business failed following the pandemic, he's now working as a bartender, when he catches the eye of a wealthy woman, played by Salma Hayek, who wants to hire him to direct a show in London. A one-night extravaganza featuring male strippers in order to make a show that the women of the audience will never forget. So, let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. I am not this film's target audience, big surprise. I wasn't even that big of a fan of the first two Magic Mike films, primarily because everything about these stories feels so fake. And I'm not talking about the stripping and the dancing, although, yes, I don't believe that anybody could put together a well-choreographed show like this in under a month. I'm talking specifically about the story and the characters. Everything about these films feel so telegraphed and boring, and all three of these films really struggle to keep my interest. But this third one in particular is especially bad, because it actually works against what the other Magic Mike films had going for them, the relationship and camaraderie between the male strippers. The strippers in this film have very little dialogue. I'm not even sure they get names. They're just there. They're not characters, they're pieces of meat, which works against the stereotype that the first two films were actively trying to avoid. But no, instead of doing things like that, this film wanted to focus on the romance between Channing Tatum and Salma Hayek, which I'm going to be honest, just isn't that interesting. Their chemistry is non-existent. I don't know what they have in common, I don't know why they like each other, and okay, you know the third act misunderstanding that plagues so many romance films almost as if they're afraid to actually have any meaningful drama? Yeah, they do that here, only much worse. Mostly because the misunderstanding makes no sense. There is literally no reason for Salma Hayek's character to hide the thing that she ends up hiding from Mike that ends up creating the tension. None. Zero. Absolutely no reason. They don't even bother to give some kind of flimsy in-universe justification. It's just so lazy. And what makes it even stranger is that Mike's decision that he chooses to make because of this misunderstanding winds up undermining that very message of female empowerment that the film is trying to gun for. Not that I think that watching a strip show is empowering in the first place, but still. And I suppose I could also bring up how this film uses feminist buzzwords and catchphrases all throughout the film to try to sell this as some kind of female empowerment story. The dialogue in this film can get genuinely cringe-inducing at times, even though, like I said, the film's plot and the characters' actions don't match what they're supposedly espousing. And it also doesn't help that the characters, especially Max, really come across as lacking in self-awareness at times. Like how when the stage winds up breaking some kind of legal code, they work to circumnavigate the law using their wealth and privilege, and the film even brings this up. only for them to say that it's okay when they're doing it because they're doing it for a noble reason. Or how in a world that is confirmed to take place in a post-COVID society, we're supposed to somehow sympathize with the uber wealthy Max for whining about how stressed and how sad she feels and how she's had a rough last couple of years. Yes, you were able to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to have an attractive stripper perform a deeply erotic, personalized lap dance, and then spend thousands more creating an entire show to satisfy your own female fantasy, firing a bunch of actors in the process for a show that was doing well to get back at your estranged husband. Let us marvel at just how truly bad you have it. And just for the record, no, I'm not arguing that we can't sympathize with rich characters, because bad things, even terrible things, can happen to them. It's just that the character in this film comes across as deeply unsympathetic because of her seeming lack of introspection. Is there anything remotely salvageable here? Well, I did laugh once, so there was that. Some of the dance choreography is particularly good, especially the final show-stopping performance with Channing Tatum and Kylie Shea, which is undercut by the film periodically interrupting that dance to show us flashbacks of the movie that we just watched. And I did enjoy the dynamic between the butler Victor and Max's daughter Zadie. They're an odd pair, but their interactions strangely work. I kind of want to see an entire film of just these two because there's potential there. But all that aside, I am really struggling to think of anything that I actually liked about this film. And those minor positive elements really can't salvage this. The story just isn't that interesting, the characters aren't really that interesting, and it can't even get the most basic elements of what it wants to accomplish correct. If you want to see an actually good film about male strippers in England, just watch The Full Monty. It is so much better than this entire franchise. Magic Mike's Last Dance gets an empty shot. Next up is the new religious-themed horror film Consecration, a film that actually seems like it might have injected some life into the tired Catholic demonic possession / ghost story, but unfortunately it doesn't quite make it, I think. The film stars Jenna Malone as a young woman who gets word that her brother, a priest, had committed suicide after murdering another priest. She heads down to Scotland to claim the body, but finds herself independently investigating his death, and soon discovers that the convent may be hiding more than they let on. If I were to describe this film, it would be with this analogy. This film is like two separate jigsaw puzzles that each have had half of their pieces removed, and then they were jumbled together. Sure, you could probably have some of the pieces snap perfectly into place, but overall the final product isn't going to be quite complete. And I say this because the film is actually a very unique spin on this kind of story. I went in kind of expecting this typical demonic possession film, but it was actually structured kind of like a typical whodunit, with the main character kind of looking into what happened, finding something that doesn't really make sense, trying to figure out the truth, but at the same time, you know that there's something supernatural going on right from the get-go, because the film has moments where there's this kind of figure that'll just stalk the characters, and I was wondering why it was happening, since I thought that it made no sense for it to happen. But then I got to the ending, and suddenly it made sense. Kind of. Unfortunately, I can't really go into spoilers, but I will say whatever you think the big reveal is, you're probably incorrect. The twist is definitely original, I will grant the film that, but I don't think the director thought through absolutely everything, and there were still some holes and questions that I wanted answered. I can't remember if the film ever explained why one of the nuns wound up removing one of her own eyes. I was also left confused as to the fates of one of the characters. Not whether they lived or died, but rather what the state of their mind is currently in. And I'm not sure if it's meant to be ambiguous or if it was just poorly communicated. And while I think I understand what they were going for with the big reveal, kind of this whole you can't fight fate or God kind of theme, I'm actually not sure if that was intentional or if it was sloppy filmmaking. I actually had the same problem with the director's previous film, Triangle, which is a film where I couldn't tell if the confusing elements were just poorly communicated or if it was deliberately ambiguous. And it's the same issue here. All throughout the film, I couldn't stop thinking of ways the script could have been better or more unique. Catholic horror films are a dime a dozen, and this film is definitely trying to be different, but I just don't think it's structured in the way that a film like this should be structured. It's like a whodunit at the start, but then it kind of devolves into a traditional Catholic horror film in the second. That being said, this is actually one of those films that even though I don't think I liked it, I'm still kind of curious about it. I do kind of want to go back through it now that I know what the twist is and see if the film makes more sense, or if the choices made by the filmmakers make more sense. As of right now, I still think this film is kind of a missed opportunity. I don't think the film handled scene transitions very well, and I left the theater more confused than struck, but I actually don't think this is that bad. The film is trying something new, the acting's pretty solid, I actually did like Jenna Malone's character, and she's good in the film. There's even a few nice subtle scares that I was impressed by, and the film's overall presentation is good. Pacing's alright, set work's good, and there's even a few creative kills. I can't find it within myself to disrecommend the film, because I'm not even quite sure if I liked it or not, but I'm not sure I can give this my recommendation either. If you like these kind of horror films, I'd say check it out. It actually has got some potential, and you might even enjoy it. But me personally, I'll file this one under, I'll give this one another chance. But as of right now, Consecration gets a semi-reluctant, half-empty shot. Next up is the new Netflix rom-com Your Place or Mine, a movie so obnoxious, fake, and cringe-inducing that I would have more fun washing my hair. Yeah, I know that saying is cliche, but I don't see why I should try harder writing this review than they did writing this script. Reese Witherspoon and Ashton Kutcher are the best of friends, but they live on the opposite sides of the country. But after a string of events, they agree to swap homes for a week, wherein he looks after her son, and she has the first weekend of independence in years. But they wind up getting a glimpse into the other's lives, and maybe, just possibly, it could lead to a romance. So here's the big problem with this film. This is a rom-com where the couple spends almost little to no time together. And maybe this could work, like if this was handled by a really mature filmmaker who really took their time writing the script and fine-tuning it to perfection. It's a challenge. The movie absolutely does not rise to the occasion. It also doesn't help that Reese Witherspoon and Ashton Kutcher have absolutely no chemistry together for the rare times where they do interact. She has more chemistry with the false romantic lead that she meets in New York, and he has more chemistry with her lesbian best friend. Nothing happens. Like, nothing. This is a movie that is so bare bones. There's no sense of timing, no sense of pacing, no sense of wit, or anything even remotely resembling conflict. There is not a single honest bone in this film's body. Every single scene feels so artificial and manufactured. Characters say and do things because that's what a person in these kind of films would do, not because it actually fits their character. Anytime anything remotely resembling conflict manages to work its way into the script, the film either ignores it or just works itself out within the next few minutes. This is also one of the worst directed films I've seen in a long time. One shot is just a simple shot showing two characters sitting in a car, and the glare on the windshield is so bad you legitimately can't see one of the characters. The dialogue sucks. There are no jokes. No, I don't mean the jokes aren't funny. I mean, legitimately, there are no jokes. Characters say things and there's a beat in the dialogue like the film expects you to laugh, but what they just said isn't anything. The film also had obnoxious text that would pop up on the screen non-stop in both the prologue and epilogue. It was annoying. It was terrible. I wanted it to not be there. I am genuinely wondering, what the heck did I even like about this film? The only salvageable part is, I guess, the relationship that forms between Ashton Kutcher's character and the son played by Wesley Kimmel. Oh, it's not done well either, but it's the one part of the film that sometimes didn't make me irrationally angry or left me feeling bored. There was potential if the film had decided to just focus on that. Sure, it's been done before, but you're talking about a film that doesn't have one original or unique idea. If you're going to have three unoriginal plots, at least focus on the one part of the film that doesn't suck as much. Just skip this. It's awful. Your Place or Mine gets a dry, empty shot. Next up is the new Amazon Prime film, Somebody I Used to Know. A film that just goes to show that there is an art to making a film about awful people, and this is not it. Alison Brie stars as Allie, a workaholic TV producer who gets some bad news when her show gets canceled. Looking to escape, she returns to her small hometown and comes across her former fiancé, played by Jay Ellis. However, as the flame starts to rekindle, she discovers that he's actually engaged to another woman, played by Kiersey Clemons, who reminds Allie of the woman that she used to be. Hurt and confused, and the hopes of possibly getting back together with her former lover, she decides to do whatever she can to sabotage the relationship. So, yeah, let's get the obvious and biggest problem out of the way. The main character is a terrible person. Like, the things that she winds up doing in this film are really nasty and underhanded and unpleasant. It doesn't matter how much natural charm Alison Brie oozes on the screen. This is a character that I 100% could not get behind in any capacity. And I think part of the issue is that this entire film's tone feels like it's trying to be a mature romantic dramedy where you're supposed to identify with and sympathize with the characters, but it was absolutely not the right call. In order for this film to work, it would need to have the vibe of something like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, another work about miserable idiots trying to make everyone else's lives just as bad as theirs, but the core difference is the presentation and the vibe. In something like this, these characters' reprehensible actions are hidden under an amiable veneer, and the film tries to pass this off as just something that's quirky or just a little mistake they made instead of something that is actively damaging and harmful. This isn't funny or eccentric or relatable, it's just disgusting. And then by the end, the film tries to wrap up everything in a nice, sweet little bow, which just feels so hollow and falls flat when compared to everything that came before it. These kinds of actions are not something that can be solved with a simple 2-minute conversation and then you just move on. This is something that would probably require counseling to have any hope of reconciliation. If you want to have a movie where the main character's goal involves them doing something bad or morally questionable, you either need to make us understand where they're coming from enough to sympathize with what they're doing, or you need to show just how pathetic they are. This film doesn't do either. Yeah, I get that she would be bummed out about losing her show. And to an extent, I can get that she's supposed to be jealous because Cassidy reminds her of herself when she was younger. But the film really struggles to make her identifiable even through her worst actions, and to make the audience want her to do the right thing in the end. I didn't want the main character to succeed in her goal, and I didn't really care to watch her attempt it either. And I didn't like the guy either, because he seems to be intentionally leading the main character on, even though he's already engaged to somebody else, somebody that he supposedly loves. He does not deserve his fiancée. And I'm not saying that in a cute or flirty way. I genuinely mean that he does not deserve her. Could the idea have worked? Sure, there's a universe where this film is actually really good. But you need to be very careful when drafting the script. And if this was the tone the film was going to go for, the ending needed to be different. It needed to go for a more realistic, nobody wins and everyone is worse off kind of ending. Its happy ending undercuts a lot of potential goodwill that it was building to. On top of that, the dialogue is pretty unnatural. The film is drastically unfunny. This is one of those films that thinks that old people having sex is inherently funny, and the film's pacing just feels off. Oh, and this is another one of those films that thinks that painfully awkward situations are just comedy gold. I just don't understand the appeal of this kind of film, especially when it has absolutely nothing substantive to say about love, relationships, or narcissism. While I didn't hate the entire thing, I greatly disliked this. Somebody I used to know gets an empty shot. And the final film tonight is At Midnight, a film that I wanted to like more than I actually did. The film stars Nanika Barbaro as the world-famous actress who comes down to Mexico to do a movie shoot. She discovers that her longtime boyfriend and co-star, played by Anders Holmes, has cheated on her and she breaks up with him, but for the sake of avoiding any bad publicity surrounding the film, they agree to keep the breakup under wraps. But while staying in a Mexican hotel, she comes across a charming hotel manager played by Diego Boneta, and the two secretly begin to meet at midnight and slowly start to fall in love. The premise is relatively standard, nothing really noteworthy, not really that many interesting hooks. The premise itself is actually pretty similar to Notting Hill, which is this formula done to its very best. And give this film some credit compared to the other romance films I've seen this week. The two main characters actually have some chemistry with each other, and the characters are likable enough. So already this film is at an advantage. but unfortunately it winds up fumbling with a series of baffling decisions. For example, the film seems to be setting up this kind of commentary about how women in the film industry are treated, and how after the big breakup, the male stays the household name and the woman fades into obscurity, which is not always true, but whatever, let's ignore that for a second. The issue is that it kind of sets up this commentary, but it doesn't really go anywhere with it. It feels like more of an artificial reason to have the two stars interact with each other to force in something resembling a love triangle. Not because the film actually wanted to make a commentary about women in the film industry. And then, once again, it does wind up going the route that you think it would for this kind of film. The guy says something stupid, and she gets mad, and he gets mad right back, and then they fight and argue and split up in the third act, and yeah, it kind of comes out of nowhere, and you want to reach through the screen and tell them to shut up and that they're both being dumb. I wouldn't mind these kind of things so much if the breakup scene felt organic, but it usually doesn't, and such is the case here. Maybe if the fame that he was receiving from dating a famous actress was getting to him, or she felt insecure about dating someone who's not famous, maybe that could be something. But no, instead they go for the stupid, oh, I was just a tourist in a one-night stand, I thought we had something special, kind of nonsense. So yeah, I didn't really like this film that much. Even the romance didn't have as many good set pieces as I would have liked. But there are some in here. Their first meeting scene is perfectly awkward, their meeting in the kitchen is appropriately cute, and I actually kind of like the idea of the two of them only meeting for their romantic trysts at midnight. There is something kind of romantic about that. But the film unfortunately falls back on way too many cliches for my taste, which ends up undermining the chemistry the two leads had. At Midnight gets a half-empty shot. And now, here's a quick recap of what I thought of the films reviewed for the week of February 10th, 2023. An empty shot for Magic Mike's Last Dance, a lost and tone-deaf third installment in a franchise that did not need to be resurrected. The film is currently in wide release. A torn but still half-empty shot for Consecration. A film that definitely goes in a different direction than you expect, but it seems a little bit torn between two great ideas. The film is currently in wide release. A very empty shot for Your Place or Mine. A painfully boring rom-com that rings hollow and forgets to actually have a romance or a story. The film is currently available for streaming on Netflix. Another empty shot for Somebody I Used to Know. A film about miserable people being terrible to each other that tries to pass itself off as charming. The film is currently available for streaming on Amazon Prime. And finally, a half-empty shot for At Midnight. A film that definitely has likable chemistry between the two romantic leads, but everything else was incredibly lackluster. The film is currently available for streaming on Paramount+. So, I wasn't really a fan of anything this week. If I had to recommend one, I'd say Consecration is the most tolerable of the bunch. It's certainly the film that kept my interest the most. So yeah, the one film that wasn't a romance. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you need a romantic theater experience, you really can't go wrong with Titanic. And remember, if you want to see my early thoughts of any film I watch or to read more of my reviews, make sure to check out my Letterboxd account. The link to that is in the description below. That's it for this week. Next time, Ant-Man and the Wasp are back exploring the quantum realm to try to save reality in the new Marvel film Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and Liam Neeson plays Raymond Chandler's famous hard-boiled detective character in the neo-noir Marlowe. Make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Have a good day, and I'll see you next weekend.